are lives history never cared to write down. No portraits, no dates, no voices left behind. Only traces of warmth in the air, faint as the scent of bread that lingers after dawn. This is one of those lives. A man whose name the city forgot, but whose hands once kept it alive. A baker who slept beside his oven. London, 1820. A city that wakes before the sun and never truly sleeps. The fog clings to the rooftops like a second skin, heavy, damp, unwilling to leave. Somewhere beneath it, the streets hum softly, the sound of hooves on whetstones echoing between brick walls and chimneys. The whole city seems to breathe, slow, exhausted, eternal. The air smells of coal and yeast, of iron, rainwater and smoke. It's the smell of work, of thousands of hands shaping the same morning again and again. Down narrow alleys, gas lamps burn with a sleepy orange glow. Between them, life begins to stir. The whisper of carts, the rustle of paper, the hiss of a kettle behind a window. But deeper still, under the skin of the city, something older moves. The faint crackle of a flame, the first heartbeat of the day. In a small shop on Bow Street, almost hidden between a cobbler's workshop and a metalworker's stall, stands a building that no one really sees. Its walls lean slightly inward, its windows are clouded with soot. Behind one of them, a dull light flickers, trembling like a candle trapped in a jar. Inside, the air is thick, half smoke, half silence, and every breath tastes faintly of ash and flour. The man who lives there has no fame, no family name that survived in any book. He's known only by the smell that drifts from his doorway each morning, a smell the city depends on, though no one ever stops to think about it. Before the church bells ring, before milk carts rattle down the cobblestones, his bread is already cooling on the counter. Steam rises from it like memory, and for a moment, even the cold London air feels almost kind. The city above him moves fast, but time here flows differently. In this dim room, where a single lamp burns low beside a brick oven, the world is slower, heavier. Ash falls like grey snow. A clock ticks unnoticed. Each sound, the scrape of a shovel, the sigh of the fire, feels like part of a ritual older than speech. No one would call this place home, yet it has the shape of one. The ceiling presses close, the walls breathe heat. Every corner is lined with reminders of use, sacks of flour, a stool worn smooth by years, a cracked mug beside a basin of water. Nothing here is beautiful, but nothing is wasted. Even the shadows seem to earn their keep. Above the bakery lies a single room, a place of rest or something close to it. No one climbs those stairs anymore. Once the loft held barrels of grain, perhaps a small bed, perhaps laughter. Now it holds dust and the memory of warmth. Below, the fire burns steadily, as if guarding what remains of both man and building. Outside, the city stirs. Boots splash through puddles. A boy runs past with a bundle of newspapers. Somewhere, a woman opens her shutters to let the grey light in. To them, the day is just beginning. But here, the day has already begun, long before the world above decided to notice. The baker moves like someone who has repeated the same motion for so many years it became instinct. His back curves toward the fire, his hands disappear into the dough. The smell of yeast fills the room, alive and breathing, like something growing under the surface of time. He never measures, never hesitates. His movements carry the weight of memory, his own and that of everyone who ever woke early to feed others before feeding themselves. The oven hums softly. Its heat seeps into the stone, into the air, into his bones. He does not speak. No one would hear him if he did. But there's a kind of conversation in the rhythm, the pulse of the fire, the quiet surrender of the dough, the way the city outside exhales each time the door opens and warmth escapes. Up above, London continues without him. Men in coats hurry past, eyes fixed on the fog. Carriages roll by, splashing through the mud. In a few hours, the market will fill with noise and colour. But here, everything stays still. The bakery doesn't change. It doesn't need to. It is a heartbeat that never joins the noise. Steady, unnoticed, indispensable. Perhaps that is what life truly is for most. Not the moments people remember, but the quiet repetition that keeps everything standing. Every loaf that leaves this room becomes part of the city's story, though the man who baked it will never be mentioned in its chapters. He is both present and invisible, like heat, like breath, like the morning itself. Sometimes, in winter, the smoke from his chimney rises higher than the fog, curling upward in delicate ribbons of grey. From far away, it looks like any other smoke. But if someone were to follow it down, through the alleys, past the carts, past the sleeping dogs, they would find the glow of a small fire and the man who keeps it alive. They would see his hands, red from the heat, shaping something simple and necessary. And maybe, just for a moment, they would understand that this too is history, the kind that never reaches books but fills the air around us. The city will change. The streets will be rebuilt, the stones replaced, the names forgotten. But as long as morning smells of bread and coal, something of him remains. A warmth beneath the noise, a heartbeat beneath the story. Not glory, not tragedy, just persistence. And that is how it begins. Not with triumph, not with loss. Just a man, a fire, and the slow, endless breath of a city that doesn't know his name. The bakery was not just where he worked. It was where he existed. The line between life and labour had long dissolved, leaving behind a single, unbroken rhythm. Knead, bake, breathe, sleep, repeat. His world fit inside 4 walls of brick and ash, each corner carrying its own kind of memory. The shop itself was narrow, built long before his birth, when the street was smaller and the air cleaner. Its wooden door sagged slightly from years of use, and every hinge complained softly each morning as he opened it to let the smell of warmth spill into the cold. A small bell hung above the frame, not for decoration, but as habit. It rang rarely now, and when it did, its sound was thin and tired, as though it too had aged beside him. Inside, light came reluctantly. The window panes were fogged from the constant clash between heat and winter air. Each pane held the memory of 1,000 mornings, fingerprints of smoke, traces of steam, fine cracks that caught the sunlight in spider webs of gold. Dust floated slowly through the beams of light, turning the air into something visible, almost alive. Even silence here had texture, a softness made of flour and fatigue. In the corner stood the heart of the room, the oven. A great arched mouth of stone and iron, older than the man himself. Its surface was blackened and scarred, yet within it pulsed the same orange glow that had once illuminated his youth. Every sound the oven made, the hiss of kindling, the sigh of settling coals, had become part of his own pulse. It was more faithful than any companion could be, and he tended to it with quiet devotion. When he leaned close to feed it, his face flickered in its light, revealing both the man he was and the boy he had been. Around the oven, life had arranged itself into a pattern of usefulness. A small table, its wood scorched by years of heat. A set of shelves crowded with jars, salt, yeast, dried herbs, and pieces of paper where he once tried to write recipes but never finished. Each object seemed to know its place, to understand its purpose better than he did. They were not possessions. They were witnesses. Together, they formed the quiet architecture of survival. Behind the workroom lay a narrow staircase. The steps creaked with the complaint of old wood, yet he climbed them each night without thinking. Upstairs was not another world, just another layer of the same one. A single room beneath the eaves, where the roof slanted low enough that he had to bend his head. The ceiling smelled of smoke that had risen through the years and decided never to leave. In winter, the air up there froze around the windows. In summer, it baked the room like dough. The furnishings were few: a bed of iron and straw, a basin and a pitcher half filled with rainwater he caught from a leak in the roof, a chair with one leg shorter than the rest, balanced by a folded newspaper no one had read. On the small table beside the bed, a candle stub melted to the shape of his nights. The wax dripped down the side like frozen tears. Sometimes, when the flame burned low, it cast his shadow across the slanted ceiling, and for a moment it looked like someone else lived there with him. No portraits hung on the walls. No letters rested in drawers. No keepsakes spoke of love or lineage. The room held nothing that didn't serve a purpose, and yet it was not empty. It was full of breath, of dust, of the faint rhythm of life repeating itself day after day. If loneliness had a sound, it would be the slow crack of the fire downstairs and the creak of the boards above it. He slept close to warmth because the world outside was never kind. When the fire below dimmed, the cold would rise through the cracks in the floor, pressing against his back like an uninvited guest. But he had learned to live beside discomfort, to treat it not as punishment, but as proof that he was still here. He used to say, though only to himself, that warmth was the only thing worth worshipping. He kept it alive as one keeps a secret, quietly, constantly, without expecting anything in return. The bakery and the room above were inseparable. One fed the other. When the oven burned bright, the ceiling above grew warm, and the air in his bed softened. When the fire waned, the chill crept in, wrapping his sleep in breathless silence. He never thought of leaving. Even when the city grew louder, even when new shops opened with painted signs and brighter windows, he stayed in his corner of dusk and flower. Perhaps he belonged to the building as much as it belonged to him. Outside his window, there was no view, only the opposite wall, bricks, soot, and a drain pipe that groaned when it rained. Sometimes pigeons perched there, cooing softly, scattering flower dust that had floated through the air. He would watch them for a while, not because they were beautiful, but because they existed without effort. They came and went freely. He did not envy them. Freedom to him had always seemed fragile, like dough before it rises, full of promise but easily ruined. There were nights when the city whispered through the cracks, faint laughter from the tavern down the street, a carriage wheel on wet cobblestones, the distant cry of a baby. He would lie still, listening. Each sound reminded him that life continued elsewhere, messier, louder, faster. But here, in this narrow home of heat and ash, time had slowed into something like peace. And though he would never say it, perhaps this was all he had ever wanted. On certain mornings, when the light came in just right, it revealed the truth of the place. The dust sparkled. The air shimmered with heat. The walls, though cracked and tired, glowed with a golden hue that made them look almost holy. It was as if the whole bakery was caught in a quiet prayer, one that never reached words but lived through repetition. A prayer made of habit, of work, of persistence, the kind only the forgotten ever learn. To anyone else, this was not a home worth remembering. To him, it was the entire world. The sound of dough sighing under his palms, the rhythm of footsteps on the same boards, the glow of coals that never fully died. The building knew him better than any person could. It remembered his mistakes, his pauses, the nights he didn't sleep. It held him the way old clothes hold the shape of their owner, not out of affection, but memory. In time, the walls and the man grew alike, both worn, both patient, both quietly necessary. If he ever wondered what would remain when he was gone, he never said it, even to himself. But perhaps he hoped that the warmth he left behind would cling to the stones a little longer, that someone, someday, would step inside and feel something they couldn't quite name. A comfort that seemed to come from nowhere, though it had been there all along. Before the city awakens, before the sky begins to fade from black to grey, he's already awake. There is no alarm, no knock, no reason. Only the habit that time has carved into his bones, a habit older than rest itself. His eyes open to darkness, and for a brief moment he does not know whether it is still night or already morning. But then he hears it, the faint settling of the fire downstairs, the quiet breathing of the oven, waiting to be fed again. And so he rises. The floor is cold beneath his feet, rough with the grain of unpolished wood. He moves slowly, not from age, but because the air itself seems heavy at this hour, as if it resists being disturbed. He dresses in the same clothes he wore yesterday, the same coarse shirt, the same apron that never truly comes clean. The scent of flour clings to everything he owns, as if it has chosen him as its vessel. In truth, it has. It coats his sleeves, his hair, the lines of his hands. To the city above, he may be just another man. But here, inside this little room, he is the keeper of something ancient and unseen, the moment between silence and sustenance. Downstairs, the fire has nearly gone out. The last embers glow faintly, like the pulse of a creature trying not to die. He kneels beside them, adds a handful of coal, then breathes gently into the ashes. It takes time. Everything he does takes time. The flames return with a whisper, not a roar. The oven comes alive again, and its light spills across the floor, touching the walls, waking the shadows. For a few seconds, he simply sits there, watching the dance of orange against the brick, as though it was something sacred. In a way, it is. The city will not know it, but this quiet, this breath of heat, is the first heartbeat of its day. He fills a small basin with water drawn from the barrel in the corner. The water is cold, metallic, still carrying the taste of the iron pipe it travelled through. He splashes his face, rubs his hands, then dries them on the same cloth he has used for years. Each motion is slow, exact, not for show, not for meaning. There is no audience here, no one to notice if he hesitates. And yet, he never does. The rhythm of his actions is a language only he speaks, a private vocabulary of survival. On the work table waits a small sack of flour, the last from yesterday's delivery. He loosens the string and dips his hand inside. The flour clings to his skin like snow, soft and silent. It is always the same, and yet every morning it feels new, like greeting an old friend who somehow never changes. He mixes it with water and salt, working the dough until it resists him, then yields. His fingers press, fold, turn, repeat. The sound it makes is quiet but alive, like a steady breath. There is no music, yet the room feels full of rhythm. The first hints of dawn slip through the window. Not light exactly, but a soft awareness that morning exists somewhere beyond the walls. The fog outside has begun to thin, though the street below still sleeps. From afar comes the faintest rattle of a wheel, the lonely call of a gull wandering from the river. These sounds are not interruptions. They are companions. They mark time not by hours, but by distance, the distance between solitude and the rest of the world. He works without hurry. The fire hums behind him. The dough grows beneath his hands. The smell begins to rise, faint at first, then thicker, sweeter, filling the air with warmth. It wraps around him like a memory he can't quite name. He thinks, perhaps, of another morning long ago, a boy beside a different oven, a teacher still alive, the same smell filling a different street. But he doesn't linger there. The past is too soft to hold. It slips through the fingers like flour dust, leaving only the faintest trace of something that once mattered. By the time the church bell tolls 6, the first loaves are ready. He slides them into the oven one after another, each shaped by hand. There is a stillness in the air now, a moment before heat transforms what is raw into what can sustain. He watches the fire do its work. The crusts begin to darken, the scent deepens, the air thickens. It is creation in its simplest form, transformation without spectacle. No one will ever see it happen, yet every life around depends on it. Sometimes, when the bread rises just right, he feels something almost like pride. But he never allows it to stay. Pride is for men who have someone to share it with. For him, there is only the act, the repetition, the continuation. His satisfaction comes not from triumph, but from survival, from the fact that he can still do what he must. Outside, the first voices begin to echo. A cart creaks down the street. A man coughs somewhere in the fog. The city is stirring, unaware of the heat that has been burning beneath it for hours. He opens the shutters a little, letting the cold rush in. The two temperatures meet, the city's chill and the oven's breath, and the air becomes alive with mist. It curls around him, shimmering like a ghost. This, too, feels sacred in its own way. The meeting of warmth and cold, of silence and sound, of sleep and waking. A reminder that even the smallest life has its own dawn. He takes one loaf from the oven, the first of the day. Steam rises, and for a moment the scent fills not just the room, but the street beyond the door. If someone were to walk by, they would pause. They might smile without knowing why. But they would not think of him. They would think of breakfast, of hunger, of home. They would not know that the warmth in their hands came from a man whose name they would never learn. He sets the loaf down, wipes his hands, and stands still. The city outside is awake now. Carriages, footsteps, the distant cry of a newspaper boy. He can hear it all, but none of it belongs to him. He belongs to the quiet between sounds, the pause that exists just before the world remembers itself. Morning is no longer new. The first customers will arrive soon. The boy with the milk, the woman with tired eyes, the soldier who never speaks. He will greet them with nods, not words. They will buy, they will leave. The rhythm will continue. And when the street grows loud, when the sun climbs too high and the heat becomes unbearable, he will look at the oven and think that all of this, has already happened 1,000 times before, and yet, somehow, it still matters. In that thought, unspoken but certain, the morning ends. Outside, London stretches, yawns, begins its day. Inside, the man who keeps it alive wipes the flour from his hands and returns to the silence that made him. In his hands, the world exists in simple elements: flour, water, salt, heat. That is all. 4 things, and yet they hold everything: hunger, patience, creation, and decay. He does not think of them as ingredients. They are forces. And each morning, as he begins again, he becomes the center where they meet. The table is covered in a fine layer of flour, like dust left by forgotten days. It softens every sound: the scrape of wood, the thud of his palms, the quiet sigh of his breath. From a distance, one might think he is sculpting something invisible. His movements are steady, neither rushed nor tired, guided by something deeper than thought. Habit, perhaps, or devotion. He pours the water slowly, watching how it seeps into the mound of flour, darkening it shade by shade. The smell rises immediately, raw and sweet, alive with the promise of warmth. When his fingers enter the mixture, they sink through softness into resistance, like memory pushing back against the present. He presses, folds, turns. Each motion leaves a trace, small valleys and ridges forming and collapsing under his touch. The dough begins to take shape, clinging to itself, gathering strength. He does not measure, not anymore. The scales sit in the corner, covered in dust. Years have taught him that exactness belongs to those who fear mistakes. He has moved beyond that. Now, his hands know the balance without numbers. He trusts them the way sailors trust the sea, not because it is kind, but because it is constant. The room is quiet except for the rhythm of his work. The city's noise has not yet reached this far below. Only the faint hum of the fire, the soft strike of palm against dough, the creak of the table as it bears the weight of both man and time. In that silence, there is something holy, not in the religious sense, but in the way repetition can turn survival into prayer. He has performed this ritual every morning for decades, and yet each time it feels like the first and the last. The dough begins to breathe. He feels it under his fingers, a subtle warmth, a pulse born from his own. He thinks, not with words, but with sensations. This thing is alive. It rises because it believes it must. It grows because it has been given warmth and patience. And for a fleeting moment, he understands something about himself. He, too, rises each morning for no other reason than the same instinct: to exist, to continue, to be shaped and reshaped by the same invisible hands. He sprinkles salt, just enough to remind the bread that the world has edges. Without it, life is too soft, too directionless. He folds the dough again, turns it, presses until it pushes back. It is a conversation without words, and he listens. When it yields, he knows it is ready. The smell of yeast fills the room, warm, intoxicating, familiar. It clings to the air, mixing with smoke from the fire. Together, they form the scent of life repeating itself, of hunger waiting to be met. If time had a smell, it would be this: steady, round, forgiving. He wipes his hands on his apron, leaving pale ghosts of fingerprints across the cloth. They overlap countless others, fading into one another, forming a quiet history of labor. No document will record his work, no photograph will preserve his face, but the fabric of his apron has already done so in its own way, one touch at a time. He moves to the oven and opens its mouth. The heat breathes out against him, sharp and intimate. He does not flinch. It feels like recognition. The fire crackles, stretches, then settles. He waits. Waiting, too, is part of the craft. In stillness, transformation begins. The dough rests under a cloth hidden from sight, growing quietly. It doesn't need attention, only time. He sits beside it, elbows on knees, eyes half closed. The light flickers across his face. He is not thinking of anything in particular, but his mind moves like the embers, slow, deliberate, reluctant to fade. He remembers his teacher, a man long gone, whose hands looked just like his. He remembers the sound of laughter in a bakery much brighter than this one. He remembers a young woman who once came every morning for a loaf she never finished. He never knew her name. He only remembers the way she held the bread, gently, as if afraid to break it. And now, years later, he understands what she felt, that warmth is not easily found, and when it is, one must hold it carefully. The dough rises. He lifts the cloth, presses a finger into its surface. Soft, resilient, alive. It pushes back slightly, as though reminding him that creation is never one-sided. He nods to himself, almost imperceptibly, then divides it into smaller pieces. Each will become a loaf, separate yet part of the same whole. He lines them on the wooden board, covers them once more, and waits again. Patience has become his truest companion. Through the small window, the day brightens. The fog outside glows faintly, touched by the pale gold of early light. Dust motes drift lazily in the air, suspended between shadow and sun. Everything is still. For a brief moment, it feels as if the city itself is holding its breath, waiting for him to finish, to release its morning into motion. He returns to the oven and tends the fire again. The sound of the shovel scraping across the coals echoes softly. He adds wood, watches as the flames leap upward. The warmth spreads, pressing against the cold that creeps in through the cracks in the door. He feels it on his face, on his chest, the same warmth he has given to others for so many years. He realizes, perhaps without realizing, that this fire is the only thing that has truly known him. By the time the first bell of the day rings in the distance, the dough is ready. He slides each loaf into the oven, one after another, his movements precise but tender. Inside, the air shimmers, turning pale dough into golden life. The smell that follows is impossible to describe. It is hunger and comfort, memory and renewal all at once. It seeps through the walls, out the door, into the street beyond. It tells the city that another morning has been made possible. He stands there for a long time, watching through the small iron hatch. The bread rises, darkens, cracks open at the top, just slightly, like lips parting to breathe. He doesn't smile, but his eyes soften. This is the only moment of beauty he allows himself, and even then, it passes quickly. When the loaves are done, he takes them out carefully. The heat stings his hands, but he doesn't mind. Pain, like everything else, has become familiar. He sets them in rows on the counter, steam rising in ghostly ribbons. The room glows faintly, alive with scent and purpose. He wipes his hands again, breathes in deeply, and closes his eyes. There is no applause, no witness, only the crackle of cooling crusts and the steady hum of the fire. To anyone else, it is work. To him, it is proof that the day has begun, that life, no matter how quiet, still answers when called by warmth. And as the city outside begins to stir, unaware of him, unaware of what it owes to these hands, he sits for a moment beside the oven, not resting, not dreaming, simply being. The world will forget him, but for now he exists in the glow of his own making. Outside, London begins to stir. Not suddenly, not all at once, but like a tide returning, slow and certain. The silence he has known for hours starts to ripple. From far away, a bell tolls, then another. The echoes travel through the narrow streets, bouncing between brick and fog, folding into the low murmur of morning life. The baker knows this sound well. It is the signal that the world above is rising, that his time of solitude is ending. He doesn't resent it, though part of him mourns the quiet that slips away. For him, dawn is not a beginning, but a threshold, the moment when his invisible labour becomes the comfort of strangers. The shutters are still half closed, keeping the light soft and golden. He opens them slowly, as if unveiling a painting. The outside air rushes in, damp and cold, and the warmth of the bakery sighs against it. For a moment, mist fills the room, the collision of two worlds, the sleeping city and the living fire. The smell of bread drifts into the street, curling upward, catching in the fog. It spreads like memory, reaching corners he will never see. Beyond the door, the cobblestones glisten from the night's rain. A milk cart rattles past, its wheels splashing through puddles. The horse's breath clouds the air in slow bursts. A lamplighter, finishing his round, extinguishes the last flame of the street. He doesn't notice the bakery as he passes. No one does. Not yet. But soon they will. Inside, the man wipes the counter clean, arranges the loaves in neat rows. They glow faintly in the morning light, their crusts cracked and shining. Each one is slightly different, the shape of a hand, the angle of pressure, the weight of sleep behind the work. They are, in their quiet way, portraits of time. He studies them for a moment, not with pride, but with the kind of understanding one has for a companion who has shared the same long road. The bell above the door trembles once, a sound small enough to be missed, if not for the silence around it. The first customer has arrived, a boy no older than 12, clutching a metal jug for milk. His boots leave prints in the flour-dusted floor. He looks at the bread the way the hungry look at warmth. The baker nods, takes a loaf, wraps it in cloth, hands it over without a word. The boy places a coin on the counter. Dull, worn, small. It is enough. The boy leaves. The bell trembles again, and the silence returns. Moments later, an old woman appears, wrapped in layers of faded cloth. Her hands shake as she counts her pennies. He waits, not impatiently, as she decides what she can afford. She chooses the smallest loaf. He adds a crusted roll beside it, pretends not to notice when she looks up in surprise. She says nothing, only nods. Her eyes glisten for a moment, though whether from smoke or gratitude, no one will ever know. Then she leaves. The door closes softly behind her. One by one, they come. A soldier in a frayed coat, smelling of rain and iron. A seamstress with ink on her fingers from marking patterns through the night. A carriage driver, half asleep, who always takes the same 2 loaves but never remembers to pay until the next day. Each brings a fragment of the world with them, a piece of noise, of colour, of life. They enter the warmth for a heartbeat, then vanish again into the fog. The baker never asks names. He doesn't need to. He knows them by the sound of their footsteps, by the way they hold the bread, by the rhythm of their voices when they say "thank you" or "good morning." In those brief exchanges, he recognizes something universal, a small, wordless gratitude between two lives that will never truly meet. Outside, the city grows louder. Wheels grind, dogs bark, doors slam. The fog lifts just enough for shapes to appear. Carts, hats, coats, shadows moving quickly through the grey. Somewhere, a vendor shouts. A whistle echoes. London, wide and endless, stretches awake. But here, inside the bakery, time continues at its own pace. The warmth softens the edges of the world. The bread cools slowly, exhaling its scent. The air flickers with heat and dust, with a quiet dignity that belongs to things made by hand. He stands behind the counter, his apron streaked with flour, his eyes calm. Around him, the room feels like the inside of a memory, not his, not anyone's, but the city's itself. Every so often he glances toward the street, not out of curiosity, but habit. He watches people hurry past, their faces pale, their voices sharp with purpose. They do not look in. They rarely do. And yet, the scent of what he makes follows them, weaving through the air like a thread, binding him to their lives in ways they'll never understand. He feeds them, though they will never know who fed them. For a moment, the light outside changes. The sun breaks weakly through the fog, spilling gold across the rooftops. It touches the window of the bakery, painting the loaves with warmth that is not from fire, but from the sky itself. He pauses. The sight is brief, delicate, fragile, but in that fragile light, the city seems almost kind. He lets it linger, then turns back to his work. By mid-morning, the crowd fades. The rush has passed. The bell above the door falls silent again, swaying slightly as if tired. The street outside grows louder still, but it feels farther away now, the sound of a world he no longer belongs to. He prefers it that way. He was never meant for the noise. He wipes the counter again, brushes the flour from his sleeves. The bread left on the shelves will last until noon. What isn't sold, he will give away, quietly, as he always does. The money he earns is enough to keep the fire alive, to buy more flour, more salt. He needs nothing else. His life, like the bread, has no decoration, only purpose. And as the city fully awakens, he stands in his small shop, surrounded by warmth and the fading scent of work completed. He listens to the hum of London through the walls, the heartbeat of a creature too large to know its own limbs. It will never know him, but he knows it, its rhythm, its hunger, its endless repetition. He is one of its many invisible hands, the pulse beneath its noise. He looks once more at the oven. The fire inside burns steady and low. He thinks, though not in words, that this is how he wishes to live. Constant, necessary, unseen. Outside, a carriage wheel splashes through a puddle. Inside, a crumb falls from his hand onto the counter. And for one quiet moment, the two worlds, the restless and the still, exist together, balanced perfectly in the space between breaths. He does not speak much. Not because he dislikes words, but because he understands how easily they disappear. A word, once said, fades into air, but a gesture, a nod, a loaf passed from hand to hand, lingers longer. It stays in the memory of both giver and receiver, like the scent of bread that clings to a coat long after one has left the shop. His customers do not come for conversation. They come for warmth, for something that feels alive in a city built of soot and stone. Still, in the small, fleeting moments of exchange, entire lives unfold. Quiet, unspoken stories that the world above has no time to hear. A young boy comes first. He works at the printing press down the street, carrying ink on his fingers and sleep still in his eyes. Every morning, the same. He places 2 coins on the counter and waits. His hands tremble slightly, not from cold, but from youth. He always chooses the same bread, the smallest, simplest, with a crust darkened by the fire. He never looks the baker in the eye. He takes the loaf, nods, and leaves. The door closes softly behind him, and his footsteps vanish into the morning fog. The baker watches him go, remembering a time when his own hands trembled the same way, not from fear, but from inexperience. He wonders, briefly, if the boy will ever grow into steadiness, or if life will always shake him. Then comes the seamstress. Her face is thin, her eyes red from candlelight and thread. She smells faintly of fabric dye and exhaustion. Sometimes she hums when she waits, a tune with no words, fragile and unsteady. He does not interrupt. Her music fills the room softly, like a ghost of something hopeful. When she pays, she counts her coins twice, always careful, always embarrassed. Once, when her hands were shaking too much to hold the change, he pretended not to notice that she dropped a coin and couldn't find it. He simply added another small loaf to her bag. She looked at him then, for the first time, not with gratitude, but with something quieter. Recognition. 2 people bound by fatigue, by the small mercies that go unseen. Later, a man in a soldier's coat arrives. The uniform is worn, buttons dull, the fabric heavy with rain and silence. He moves stiffly, as though carrying the weight of a war no one remembers. He never stays long. He places his coins on the counter with precision, always the same number. Sometimes, when the baker hands him his bread, their fingers touch briefly. The soldier's hand is cold. He grips the loaf as if afraid it might vanish. Then he nods, once, sharply, and leaves. Through the window, the baker watches him walk away, the fog swallowing his figure until only the sound of boots remains. He wonders how long a man can keep walking when there is nowhere left to return to. Mid-morning brings the widow from across the alley. Her shawl is the same every day, black, frayed, smelling faintly of lavender. She doesn't buy much. Sometimes she only stands at the counter, holding the warm loaf in her hands, as if drawing life from it. The baker understands. Bread cools quickly, so does company. He lets her stand as long as she needs, saying nothing. Eventually she leaves, whispering something under her breath that sounds almost like "thank you," though perhaps it's only a sigh. Then there is the coal merchant's wife, loud, bright, alive. She bursts in with laughter and cold air, her cheeks flushed from the morning's work. She speaks too much for the quiet of the shop, filling it with colour that doesn't belong. He doesn't mind. Her voice, though sharp, reminds him that not every soul here carries silence as a burden. She calls him Baker, as though it were his name. He doesn't correct her. She pays generously, leaves crumbs of conversation behind her, and disappears into the clatter of the street. Throughout the morning, people come and go. Each leaves behind a trace, a word, a glance, a scent. The bakery collects them all like dust in sunlight. It becomes a place not only of bread, but of fragments, the kind of fragments that make a life feel less alone. The baker, though he never speaks, listens deeply. He listens not to words, but to pauses, to sighs, to the way people touch the bread before buying it, as though confirming that something real still exists in their world. Sometimes, when the shop is briefly empty, he imagines their lives outside these walls, The boy at the press, stained with ink, dreaming of better shoes. The seamstress, counting stitches until her fingers bleed. The soldier, walking without destination. The widow, tracing her husband's name in dust. Each of them carries their own quiet weight, and somehow, each morning, they leave a part of it here. Maybe that's what keeps the bakery warm, long after the fire should have gone out. The bell rings again. Another customer, another small story. A man with hands too clean to be working class, yet not gentle enough to be rich. He buys the most expensive loaf, leaves without speaking. His boots are polished, but his eyes are tired. The baker watches him go, wondering whether wealth and exhaustion always live in the same house. He wipes the counter once more, though it isn't dirty. It is a reflex, the small repetitive act that fills the silence between lives. Outside, the fog has thinned. The street glows faintly now, touched by a pale sun. He sees faces more clearly, some familiar, some new. But he knows none of their names. He doesn't need to. The city speaks through gestures, and he understands its language better than most. By noon, the rush fades. The bell grows still, the shelves half empty. The warmth in the room begins to settle into a softer, quieter rhythm. He stands behind the counter, his hands resting on the wood worn smooth by years of repetition. The scent of baked bread clings to him like memory. For a moment, he closes his eyes, and the hum of the city outside melts into the slow, steady beat of his own heart. If someone were to look through the window now, they would see only a man standing still, motionless in a haze of dust and light. They would not know that, inside him, entire stories unfold, the silent gratitude of strangers, the weight of years measured not in time but in loaves. They would not know that his quiet has become the city's heartbeat. To most, he is invisible, a background figure in the theatre of mourning. But in truth, every street, every worker, every child who passes carries a fragment of his work within them. They eat, they move, they live, because somewhere, before they woke, a man had already given shape to warmth. He doesn't need them to remember him. He only needs them to keep living. As the day leans toward afternoon, he turns the sign on the door to closed. The light shifts. The city continues, loud and bright. But here, behind the quiet glass, the baker exhales, his eyes half closed, his hands dusted in white. He has spoken to no one. Yet somehow he has spent the morning surrounded by voices. The rush has ended. The last customer's footsteps fade into the street, leaving behind only the soft tremor of the bell above the door. It sways once, twice, then rests. The air inside the bakery still holds the warmth of work, dense, fragrant, full of quiet movement. Steam rises from the cooling loaves, weaving through shafts of light like pale smoke. It is not yet afternoon, but the morning feels already old. He wipes the counter again, though it no longer needs it. It is a motion without thought, a rhythm he repeats simply because silence needs something to hold on to. The rag glides across the surface, gathering invisible dust, redistributing it. The same motion, the same sound, day after day. The gesture itself has become a kind of meditation, proof that time is still passing, even when nothing happens. The fire behind him burns lower now, a quiet pulse in the brick heart of the oven. He can hear it breathing, the crackle of wood collapsing into embers, the faint hiss of heat against stone. The sound comforts him. It means the world is still warm. It means the day still has direction. Without the fire, everything would fall still. Not just the bread, but his own body, his own sense of existence. Sometimes he wonders if the flame burns for him or if he burns for it. He sits down on the small stool near the wall, the same one he has used for years. The wood is worn smooth, curved to the shape of him. It creaks when he shifts his weight, a familiar complaint, like an old friend speaking softly in another language. His hands rest on his knees. He does not move. He has earned a moment of stillness, though he would never call it rest. Rest is for those who can afford to stop. He merely pauses, long enough to listen. The city beyond his window hums faintly, a low, constant murmur. It is the sound of life continuing without him. Carts clatter, distant voices rise and fall, church bells drift through the air in fragments. He can tell the time by sound alone. He always can. The bells of St. Martin's, slower than most, announce the hour. It will be noon soon. He doesn't need a clock. His body has learned the measure of the day by the rhythm of hunger. The sunlight reaches farther across the floor now. It glows gold against the flour, turning every speck of dust into something momentarily beautiful. He watches as the light climbs the wall, touches the shelf of jars, the handle of a knife, the rim of a bowl. Each thing receives its brief share of brilliance before the light moves on. Nothing holds it for long. The thought settles deep in him, the quiet truth that everything, even warmth, is borrowed. He rubs his palms together slowly, feeling the roughness of skin, the small burns from years of feeding the oven. His hands no longer ache as they once did. They have forgotten how to complain. Each scar tells a story he no longer remembers clearly, moments of clumsiness, of rush, of small pain quickly ignored. To him, they are not wounds, but proof. Proof that he has lived through another morning, that he has shaped something, however small, out of nothing. He leans back slightly, eyes half closed, and listens to the silence breathing. For a moment, the world seems perfectly balanced. Noise outside, quiet inside, smoke above, warmth below. He thinks of how many mornings have passed this way. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, and how little any of them demanded from him other than endurance. The thought doesn't sadden him. If anything, it soothes him. There is comfort in the ordinary, in the kind of life that leaves no mark except in the rhythm of days. Sometimes he imagines that time itself lives in this room, gathering in the corners, sleeping in the folds of the curtain, clinging to the edges of every tool he uses. Each motion, each breath adds to it, thickens it, turns it into something tangible. He can feel it pressing gently around him, like a familiar weight. It does not threaten him. It keeps him company. Through the small open window, a breeze drifts in. It smells faintly of coal and damp iron, but also of something softer. A bakery 2 streets away, perhaps, or a woman washing clothes by the river. The scents mingle, blurring the lines between his world and theirs. He exhales slowly, letting the air leave him as quietly as it entered. In that breath, he feels the city move, not as something vast and unreachable, but as something alive, connected. He does not belong to it, and yet he is part of its pulse. He reaches for a loaf, one that cracked too deeply on top to sell. Its imperfection makes it his. He tears a piece from it, still warm inside, the crust flaking against his fingertips. The taste is simple, faintly sweet, faintly smoky. It fills his mouth with the same feeling he gives to others each morning, a small moment of satisfaction, quickly gone, yet somehow complete. He eats slowly, without hunger, as if each bite were a memory rather than a meal. When he finishes, he brushes the crumbs from his lap and stands. The light has shifted again. The gold has turned softer, almost white. He moves to the window. The street below is brighter now, more alive, more hurried. Children run past with ribbons of laughter. A man shouts to another across the road. A carriage rumbles by, spraying mud against the walls. The world outside seems impossibly fast, and yet, to him, it moves no differently than the fire's flame, rising, fading, returning again. He wonders, not sadly, how many of these people will ever notice the smell that fills their mornings. The scent of bread, rising from cracks in the street, curling through the air like invisible thread. It follows them, touches them, reminds them briefly of something warm, something human. And yet they never think of the hands that made it. He does not blame them. The best gifts are the ones given quietly. The bells begin again, 12 strokes, slow and deliberate. The sound rolls through the city like a tide washing over stone. Each note lingers a moment before dissolving. He closes his eyes and listens. The echo fills the room, mixes with the heartbeat of the oven, the faint rustle of cooling bread, the whisper of dust settling. In this harmony of small sounds, he finds his peace. Noon. Half the day already gone, and yet it feels untouched, as if the morning still lingers, unwilling to let go. He feels it too, the soft resistance of time, the strange pause that exists between doing and being. He has worked, he has fed the city, he has watched it wake. And now, for a short while, he simply waits, not for anything specific, just for the next breath, the next hour, the next quiet continuation. In that waiting, he senses something eternal, the pattern that holds the world together, work, rest, hunger, warmth, repeating endlessly without need for witnesses. He is a part of that pattern, no greater or smaller than the others. And that thought, simple as it is, feels like truth. The church bells fade. The sound drifts upward through the fog, dissolving into distance, leaving behind only the hush that follows something complete. The bakery rests in that hush, warm, dim, alive but motionless. For the first time since dawn, there is nothing to do. No bread to shape, no customers to serve, no fire to feed. Only the slow breathing of heat trapped in stone, the faint ticking of cooling metal, the whisper of crumbs settling on the counter. He moves through the room as though it were filled with invisible water, each motion slow, deliberate, patient. He takes a cloth and wipes the table, not out of need, but habit. He straightens the baskets, aligns the loaves, adjusts the lamp. These gestures are not tasks. They are language. The language of a man who spends his days in conversation with silence. From a shelf, he retrieves a small tin plate, slightly bent at the edge, and places it on the counter. Beside it, a wooden cup, darkened by years of use, stained with smoke and time. He pours water from a jug, the sound small and fragile, like rain falling somewhere very far away. Then he sits. Lunch is not a meal. It is an interlude. A pause between repetitions, meant not to satisfy, but to remind him that he is still made of flesh and hunger. He tears a piece from one of the loaves left unsold, the crust rough, the inside still faintly warm. He dips it in the water, softening it. The bread breaks apart easily, dissolving on his tongue with the taste of salt and smoke. He eats slowly, without appetite, but with care. There is a quiet dignity in eating what his own hands have made. Outside, the light has grown stronger. Through the open shutters, the street glows pale gold. Voices drift in. Laughter, wheels, footsteps, the calling of vendors. The world has reached its full momentum, but none of it enters here. The bakery exists apart, like a forgotten heart still beating in the chest of a busy giant. He sits still for a long while, chewing slowly, swallowing rarely. He is not thinking, not exactly. His thoughts move like dust in sunlight, visible but aimless. Fragments, memories, sensations. The smell of sea air from years ago, though he has never seen the ocean. The face of his teacher framed by firelight. A winter when the oven broke and the cold nearly won. A summer when flour was scarce and customers fewer, but somehow the fire still burned. He thinks of none of these fully. He simply lets them pass through him, like echoes returning to where they began. He finishes his meal, wipes the crumbs into his palm, and sets them aside for the sparrows that visit the doorstep. Nothing is wasted. Even what is small must find its use. He stands, stretching his back. The motion is stiff but uncomplaining. Years of bending over dough have curved him slightly forward, as though he is always leaning toward the fire, toward work, toward life itself. He does not notice. His body has become the shape of his duty. From the window he watches the street. The faces outside are bright now, washed in midday light. A man in a clean coat hurries past, holding a paper parcel. Two women argue near the well, laughter tangled with complaint. A carriage stops, then moves again, leaving a dark trail of wetness on the stones. He observes it all with the same calm attention he gives his bread, noticing everything, claiming nothing. He has always preferred observing to participating. There is a kind of peace in being unseen. To live quietly, to move through life without disturbing its surface, that, to him, has always felt like grace. Yet sometimes, on days like this, when the city glows too brightly, a strange feeling rises in him. Not envy, not sorrow, something smaller, lighter. A wish, perhaps, to be remembered. Not celebrated, not known, just remembered. A thought that passes as soon as it comes. He turns from the window. The air inside the bakery seems thicker now, scented with warmth and cooling ash. He takes a seat near the oven again, feeling its faint breath against his hands. The fire has dimmed to a quiet glow, but its heat still lingers in the stones. He presses his palm to the brick and closes his eyes. The warmth seeps into his skin, into his bones. He imagines it traveling through him like light through dust. For a brief moment, he feels connected to the fire, to the city, to everything that breathes and fades. He has no family, no photograph of parents, no letters, no keepsakes. Only the faint memory of a name once spoken often, now rarely heard. He does not know whether anyone still thinks of him. Perhaps someone, somewhere, remembers the boy he was, the apprentice, the dreamer, the one who once wanted to bake for love instead of survival. If they do, they have never come looking. He doesn't blame them. Life pulls people in different directions, and not everyone finds their way back. He opens his eyes again. The fire crackles softly, reminding him of presence, of now. He thinks, though the thought is wordless, that perhaps the truest kind of life is this: to exist without witness, to give warmth without demand, to vanish slowly into usefulness. He has never asked for more. The bread on the counter begins to cool. The crusts harden, the scent dulls. He knows that by evening they will no longer be wanted. But he will keep them anyway, stacked neatly on a wooden board, to be given away before night. The poor, the beggars, the stray children. They will come when the streets grow dark, when shame hides more easily in shadow. He will give them what remains, saying nothing. He has done it every day for as long as he can remember. It is not kindness, it is routine. But somewhere within that routine, kindness hides. He drinks the last of the water. It tastes of metal and dust, but he drinks it as though it were fine wine. He sets the cup down gently, as if afraid to disturb the stillness now filling the room. The city outside has grown louder, its midday roar pressing faintly against the walls. But here it only deepens the quiet. Sound becomes distance. Distance becomes peace. He closes the shutters halfway to block the glare. The light softens again, turning gold to amber, amber to dusk's first whisper. He returns to his stool, sits, folds his hands in his lap. There is nothing more to do until evening. No one will come for hours. He listens to the faint hum of the oven, the ticking of the cooling metal, the sound of his own breath. It is enough. The city eats, talks, laughs. He waits. Not impatiently, not expectantly, just as one waits for the next breath, knowing it will come whether wanted or not. He lives in the rhythm between hunger and heat, between giving and rest. He has made peace with the smallness of his world. And perhaps in that peace there is something greater than contentment, a kind of grace that only those who live quietly ever touch. Outside, a clock strikes once, 12:30. Inside, nothing moves. The fire sighs, and the man who has fed a city sits alone, surrounded by warmth that needs no witness. The sun leans low, though the city does not yet know it. Its light, stretched thin through the London haze, finds its way through the cracks in the shutters. Inside the bakery, the air turns amber. Not warm, not cold, but heavy, like air that remembers heat. It smells of ash, yeast, and faint sweetness, the scent of things both made and ending. The baker sits where he always sits when the day begins to fade, on the stool by the oven, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The world outside hums at full strength, carts clattering, traders shouting, laughter tangled with argument. But here, time has dissolved. The noise passes by the window like a river beside a rock. He hears it, but it no longer belongs to him. He knows this hour well. It is the hour when work has ended, but rest has not yet begun. That strange in-between when everything seems to hold its breath. He has lived more than 1,000 afternoons like this one. He has watched the same light crawl across the same wall, heard the same fire shrink to embers, felt the same stillness settle around him. And yet, each time, it feels slightly different, like the repetition of a dream whose meaning you can never quite recall. The fire inside the oven is no longer bright. It glows from deep within, pulsing gently behind the iron door. When he opens it to stir the coals, the heat brushes his face. Familiar, intimate, almost tender. He feeds the fire a few more pieces of wood, not because the bread needs it, but because he cannot bear to see it die too soon. He listens to the small crackle that follows, the faint whisper of flame taking breath again. That sound, he thinks, is what life truly is. Brief, soft, necessary. He closes the door and sits back down. The light has shifted again. Now it falls across the counter, where the day's unsold loaves rest in quiet patience. Their golden crusts have dulled to brown, and the air no longer carries their scent. Still, they look alive somehow, as if holding on to the memory of heat. He watches them the way one might watch an old friend sleep, with affection, but also with the quiet knowledge that nothing stays warm forever. A fly circles lazily in the air, drifting between the window and the lamp. Its buzzing seems almost loud in the stillness. He doesn't chase it away. There is no need. Everything that moves belongs here. He leans back, his shoulders touching the wall. The bricks are cool now. Through them, he can feel the faint pulse of the city, the footsteps, the wheels, the endless motion of those who still believe the day is long. He smiles, barely, almost imperceptibly. He once believed the same. But years of mornings and evenings have taught him that life is not long. It is wide, stretching quietly across small moments like this, where nothing happens, and yet everything exists. The light on the floor shifts again. It has grown softer, almost grey. Dust floats through it, moving like thought. He watches it drift, swirl, vanish. If someone were to enter the bakery now, they might think the man was asleep. But he isn't. He's listening, not to sound, but to absence. The kind of listening that belongs to those who have run out of things to say. Sometimes he imagines that the bakery itself breathes with him, the walls expanding and contracting, the floor creaking softly in rhythm with his pulse. It is, after all, alive in its own way, built of years and hands and warmth. It holds the memory of every loaf ever baked, every person who has stood here, every echo of footsteps across its wooden boards. When he dies, he thinks, the building will remember. Not his name, just his warmth. That is enough. He closes his eyes for a moment. Behind his eyelids, the light turns red. He can see the sun fading through the thin skin of the day. He thinks of all the afternoons he has seen, the endless stream of them, indistinguishable yet infinite. Each one a thread in the same quiet fabric, woven by work and fire and waiting. He wonders, though only faintly, how many remain. Outside, a clock chimes once, a warning that the light is changing. The sound rolls down the street, echoed by another bell farther away. The city stretches, adjusts, begins to slow. Shadows lengthen. Somewhere, someone closes a shop, another lights a candle, another locks a door. Each of them believes the day is ending. For him, it never truly does. His life is a single, unbroken day, repeated endlessly in flour and smoke. He rises slowly, joints stiff, movements careful. He walks to the window, pulls the shutters open fully. The brightness startles him for a moment. The last rays of afternoon flooding the room, turning everything gold. The loaves, the dust, even his hands, all glow as though the fire has spread beyond the oven, claiming the whole space. He stands there, motionless, bathed in light that feels almost merciful. If heaven exists, he thinks, perhaps it looks like this. A small, dusty room full of warmth and stillness, where everything glows without reason. Children pass outside, chasing one another, their laughter cutting through the low hum of the street. A dog barks. Someone calls a name. Life continues, indifferent but beautiful. He watches it with the soft acceptance of someone who no longer needs to be part of it to understand it. The sun dips behind the roofs, and the light withdraws as gently as it came. The room grows pale, then grey. The gold fades from the walls. The dust turns invisible again. He closes the shutters halfway, leaving just enough of a gap for twilight to breathe through. The bakery settles into its second silence of the day, deeper, cooler, more final. He sits once more, But this time his body feels heavier, not with exhaustion, but with the calm that follows long understanding. He has lived this day so many times that it no longer feels like something to move through, more like something he carries within him. The morning, the rush, the noon, the quiet, all of it folded neatly inside him, like layers of dough waiting for heat. He places his hand against the oven door again. It is still warm, but only barely. The heat that once roared now hums faintly, almost shy. He leaves his hand there, feeling the last of it seep into his skin. The warmth feels older now, gentler, like an old friend saying goodbye without words. He does not speak. He never does. But if one could listen closely enough, they might hear the thought that moves through him. Not sad, not fearful, simply true. All things cool eventually. Bread, fire, days, hearts. It is the nature of warmth to fade, and the grace of living to accept it. Outside, the shadows of evening begin to stretch across the cobblestones. Inside, the baker remains where he is, surrounded by what he has built, what he has burned, what he has fed. The air trembles once, softly, as though sighing. Then everything is still. The city continues. The sun sets. And in a small, forgotten corner of London, a man and his oven share the quiet that comes when everything necessary has already been done. The light has grown softer now, the kind of light that belongs not to the present, but to memory. It drifts through the window like dust from another life, touching the shelves, the loaves, the hands that have not yet forgotten how to work. The bakery is quiet. The fire hums gently, and in that stillness the past begins to breathe again. He does not summon it. It comes on its own, as it always does when the day begins to lean toward evening. Something in the air changes, the smell of flour cooling, the echo of footsteps fading down the street. It opens a small door inside him, and behind that door lives everything he has ever been. He remembers the old master first. A small man with a large voice, his hands like burnt wood, his apron always covered in ash. He worked in a bakery much older than this one, where the ceiling was low and the air always smelled of yeast and fire. The boy, for he was only a boy then, used to arrive before dawn, his eyes still heavy with sleep, his fingers clumsy, eager to learn. The master never praised and never shouted. He taught by repetition, by silence, by allowing mistakes to become teachers of their own. The boy learned not through words, but through rhythm, how to knead until his arms trembled, how to watch the fire until he could feel its mood, how to listen to the dough breathe as it rose. In those years, he believed mastery was a matter of patience. He didn't yet understand that patience itself was the craft. He remembers the sign that hung above that bakery, a wooden board carved with a small wheat sheaf and a single word now long forgotten. He used to trace its outline when no one was watching, dreaming of the day when he might have a sign of his own, a mark not of pride, but of existence, proof that he too had shaped something lasting in a city that swallowed names as quickly as it consumed bread. When the master grew old, the boy took on more of the work. He lit the fire each morning, counted the sacks of flour, carried loaves to the market. He began to move like the master, slower, more deliberate, as though he too had become part of the bakery's structure. And when the master finally died, quietly, as all things die in places full of heat and patience, the boy found himself alone beside the oven, tending a fire that no longer belonged to anyone else. He stayed for a while, out of duty or fear, he could never tell. Then one morning, he took his apron, his knife, and what little money he had, and left to find his own corner of the city. He walked for hours through streets filled with fog and coal smoke, searching for a place where the air smelled less of others' hands. When he found this small shop, empty, cracked, forgotten, he knew it was enough. He built his life here, brick by brick, loaf by loaf. The sign above the door never bore his name. He never made one. Somewhere along the way he stopped needing proof. He leans back in his chair now, eyes half closed, and the memory shifts again, not to work, but to warmth. There was a woman once. He cannot recall her name, not with certainty, nor the exact shade of her hair. Memory is kind that way. It keeps only what it must. But he remembers her laughter, quiet, unsure, as if she was afraid it might wake something sleeping in the world. She used to come in late in the mornings when the rush had passed, her hands wrapped in wool, her face pink from the cold. She always bought the same loaf, round, small, slightly burnt at the edges. She said it was her favorite, though he suspected she said that to make him smile. She paid in coins sometimes, in flowers other days, in silence most often. He never asked who she was waiting for or where she went when she left. He remembers the first time he noticed how she held the bread, not as food, but as something delicate, a thing meant to be kept warm, to be carried gently through the streets. He watched her hands, how they cupped the loaf as though it were alive, and he realized then that what he gave to people was never just bread. It was warmth, borrowed and passing, yet real enough to be felt. Years passed. She stopped coming. He never asked why. He never asked anything. Some mornings, when the oven's light catches the air just right, he still sees her shape in the dust, brief, flickering, like the shadow of a memory that refuses to fade completely. He wonders if she ever thinks of that small shop with the crooked sign and the man who said nothing. He doubts it, and somehow that makes the memory even dearer. He breathes in deeply. The air still smells the same as it did then, flour, smoke, and faint sweetness. Time has not changed that. It only softened the edges, blurred the details. He finds comfort in that blur. Sharp memories hurt, soft ones warm. The city outside begins to cool, the sounds of commerce replaced by footsteps going home. He remains still. Inside his chest, the past and the present sit side by side, like two loaves from the same dough, one eaten, one yet untouched. He does not mourn what has gone. He simply holds it, the way she once held the bread, carefully, without pressure, knowing it will crumble if grasped too tightly. He looks around the bakery. Nothing has changed. The same oven, the same table, the same faint stains of flour that never truly vanish. But somewhere in the air hangs the echo of his younger self. The boy who dreamed of a sign, the apprentice who believed in mastery, the man who once thought warmth could be kept forever. They are all here still, layered like sediment beneath the present moment. He reaches for a loaf on the counter, one of the last. He breaks it open with his hands. The sound is soft, familiar. Steam rises briefly before fading into the air. He looks at the empty space where the steam had been and smiles faintly. There is something perfect about how warmth disappears, quickly, completely, without trace. It reminds him of her, of the master, of the boy who began all this, of the fire that has never stopped burning, even as it cools. Outside, the sun lowers behind the rooftops, painting the windows across the street in amber and smoke. Inside, The bakery glows gently, like a memory still alive. He sits, the bread in his hands, his eyes distant but calm. And for a moment, time folds in on itself. The boy, the man, the master, the woman, all existing together in one quiet breath, one endless afternoon of warmth and dust. When the light finally fades, he does not move. He lets the past settle back into the walls where it belongs. He knows it will return tomorrow, just as it always does, when the air once again smells of bread and smoke. Memories, like dough, rise when the room grows warm. The memories recede as softly as they arrived, leaving the room exactly as it was, the air thick with quiet and the faint pulse of heat from the oven. For a while, he remains still, as if afraid that any movement might disturb the fragile calm that memory has left behind. But habit is stronger than reflection. The body remembers what to do, even when the mind drifts elsewhere. And so, without deciding, he rises. The stool creaks, the floor answers with its familiar sigh. His back straightens slowly, the motion almost ritual. The day has thinned, but not ended. There is still bread to finish, ashes to clear, warmth to keep alive. Work, for him, has never been a burden. It is the thread that ties him to the world. Without it, he would unravel. He moves first to the oven. The coals inside have dulled to a quiet red. He opens the small iron door and feels the warmth brush his skin. Not burning now, but gentle. The heat of a friend grown old. He takes the shovel and stirs the ashes, listening to the faint hiss that follows. Sparks leap upward, tiny and brief, then vanish. He adds a little wood, not much, enough to keep the glow breathing. The fire hums again, obedient. The sound steadies him more than thought ever could. The smell of smoke returns, filling the corners of the room, mixing with the scent of cooling bread. He breathes it in deeply, the way one might breathe after prayer. There is comfort in the return of purpose, in knowing that even after memory, the world still waits to be tended. He moves through the shop with slow efficiency, checking what remains. Half a dozen loaves on the board, 2 trays of small rolls cooling near the window. The rest gone. Eaten, sold, traded, forgotten. He counts them not by number, but by weight, by rhythm, by how full or empty the room feels. It feels light now, as it always does after the rush of morning. Light in sound, in scent, in soul. He dusts the counter once more, though flour already coats everything in a pale film. The white powder softens every edge, turns even the hardest surfaces tender. He likes that. How flour hides the cracks, how it makes even mistakes look deliberate. He runs his hand across the wood, leaving faint streaks where his fingers have passed. The lines look like writing, though no words are there to read. Outside, the light has cooled to silver. Shadows stretch across the cobblestones, and the first chill of evening presses against the glass. He feels it in his hands, the way the warmth leaves the air first, then the skin, then the bones. He moves a little closer to the oven, his anchor against the slow arrival of cold. He begins again, not a full batch, just enough to keep the rhythm. Water, flour, salt, his hands. The motions are smaller now, slower but precise. He no longer works to feed the city. He works to keep the day intact. Every fold of dough, every sweep of flour across the board is a way of telling time, a quiet measure of endurance. As he kneads, his thoughts drift not backward now, but inward. He thinks of nothing specific, only of the weight of the dough, the warmth of the air, the sound of his breath. There is a peace in this repetition, that memory could never give him. Memory stirs what cannot be changed. Work restores what still can. He shapes a small loaf, smaller than the rest, perhaps too small to sell. He sets it aside on a separate board. He always makes one like this, a habit that began without reason and never ended. Some nights he eats it, others he gives it away. Sometimes he forgets it entirely. But he likes knowing it's there, a simple thing made only for itself. The room grows darker. The single lamp above the table flickers, its flame shivering in the draught that sneaks through the door. He adjusts the wick, steadies the light. The glow falls over his hands, over the dough, over the thin lines of flour floating in the air. The shadows move with him, bending and straightening like silent apprentices. It feels, for a moment, as if he is not alone, as if the echoes of all his former selves stand around him, watching, working, learning still. He smiles faintly at the thought. Then the smile fades, not from sadness, but from stillness, the natural way joy softens when it has nowhere to go. He slides the small loaf into the oven. The fire accepts it without complaint. He closes the door and waits. The minutes that follow belong to silence. He sits again, listening to the low hum of the oven, the slow ticking of cooling metal, the heartbeat of a world that exists only within these walls. He knows this sound better than any voice. It tells him everything. When the bread is ready, when the wood is low, when the night is near. Through the shutters, the city shifts tone. The noise grows distant, stretched thin by dusk. The cries of vendors fade, replaced by the rhythm of footsteps going home. He can almost picture them, men in coats, women carrying baskets, the boy from the printing press, the widow in her shawl, each carrying a piece of his labor, unaware of its maker. He imagines their homes filled with the scent of what began here. That thought is enough to make the evening feel whole. The bread finishes baking, a single loaf, light and round. He removes it carefully, sets it on the counter. The crust cracks softly, releasing its quiet steam. He watches it for a moment, then turns away. He doesn't need to eat it tonight. Its warmth is enough company. He wipes his hands, unties his apron, folds it neatly beside the lamp. The day begins to settle around him like cooling ash. The fire will last a little longer, just long enough to keep him warm while he closes the shop, sweeps the floor, clears the last of the flour from the boards. Tomorrow will come exactly the same, and he will be ready. He always is. As he works, he hums under his breath. Not a song, not even a tune, just a low vibration that keeps time with his movements. It fills the air like a second heartbeat, fading each time he stops, returning each time he begins again. He doesn't know when he started doing it. Perhaps the master once did. Perhaps the sound of the fire taught him. Perhaps it is simply the voice of work itself, speaking softly through those who listen long enough. When everything is done, he stands still in the center of the room. The light trembles. The air glows faintly with dust and the ghost of heat. For a moment, the bakery feels endless. Not a place, but a rhythm, a continuation. He has been here his entire life, and still, each evening feels like the first. He turns the lamp down. The light shrinks to a golden seed, then fades. The fire sighs in reply. In that shared quiet, man and flame, work and rest, the day folds neatly upon itself, ready to begin again. The night has begun to gather at the edges of the windows, though the fire still glows faintly in the oven's heart. The bakery feels full, not of sound, but of air, thick with smoke and the scent of cooling crusts. He moves slowly now, clearing the last traces of flour from the counter, stacking the wooden trays in their corner. Each sound, the scrape of wood, the soft fall of ash, echoes louder than it should, as if the walls have grown too used to silence. Then comes a knock, soft, uncertain, the kind that does not ask permission, only tests whether anyone still lives behind the door. He hesitates. Few people ever come at this hour. The customers are gone, the hungry not yet awake. For a brief second he wonders if he imagined it, a noise made by the cooling wood or the wind slipping through the shutters. But then it comes again, slightly firmer, wrapped in a kind of apology. He wipes his hands, moves to the door, opens it halfway. Outside stands his neighbour, the blacksmith from across the alley, a large man, broad-shouldered, his face greyed with soot and fatigue. He holds his cap in one hand, the other clutching a small cloth bundle. Behind him, the fog thickens, carrying with it the smell of coal and rain. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The baker steps aside, and the man enters, carefully, as though afraid his presence might break something fragile. The door closes, and the room swallows them both in its warmth. The blacksmith removes his coat, shakes the damp from it, and stands awkwardly near the table, unsure whether to sit or stay standing. He is not used to silence this deep. It makes him feel large, clumsy, out of place. He sets the bundle on the table. Inside are two small pieces of coal, dark and gleaming faintly in the lamplight. The baker looks at them, then at the man, and nods once. The gesture is simple, wordless, gratitude exchanged without sound. The blacksmith nods back, equally quiet. They stand together for a while, two men bound by heat, one who shapes fire into iron, another who shapes it into bread. They are of the same world, though they rarely meet in it. Each understands the other's language without needing words. The rhythm of the forge and the rhythm of the oven are not so different. Heat, creation, exhaustion, renewal. The blacksmith looks around the bakery. His eyes linger on the loaves lined neatly on the counter, the stacks of empty baskets, the faint shimmer of flour dusting everything like frost. He breathes deeply, his shoulders softening. Perhaps he came for this, not to bring coal, not to ask anything, but simply to stand in warmth that smells of life rather than metal. The baker gestures toward a chair. The man sits. The stool creaks, the fire hums. The blacksmith removes his gloves, his hands raw and cracked, skin like dark leather. He rubs them together slowly, letting the warmth seep in. Time thickens between them. The silence that might have been uncomfortable elsewhere feels natural here, as if it belongs to the room itself. Every breath, every small movement becomes part of its rhythm. After a while, the blacksmith clears his throat softly, not to speak, just to remind himself that he still can. He glances toward the oven. The coals inside glow like a heart seen through the skin of stone. He watches them for a long time, lost in thought. When he finally looks up, his eyes carry something heavier, the kind of news that weighs down the air before it's said. He says a few words, low, almost reluctant. The baker listens, motionless. Someone has died. The coal seller, an old man who lived near the river, fell ill in the cold, gone before morning. No one found him until the smoke stopped rising from his chimney. The words are simple, factual, but they settle heavily in the space between them. The baker's hands tighten slightly against the edge of the table. He nods once, slow, deliberate. Death is no surprise here. It arrives like winter, familiar, expected, unwelcome only in timing. The blacksmith lowers his gaze, perhaps regretting having brought it. But the baker does not seem angry, nor sad, only still. The fire inside the oven cracks once, sharply, then goes quiet again. The two men remain there for some time, bound by silence thicker than grief. It is not mourning they share, but understanding, that unspoken recognition between those who work close to fire, who know how warmth gives and takes in equal measure. The baker rises, walks to the counter, and cuts a small piece of bread. He places it on a plate and sets it before the blacksmith. The gesture says everything that words cannot. The man accepts it, hesitates for a moment, then eats slowly, his hands trembling slightly with exhaustion. The crust breaks beneath his teeth, the steam fades quickly, but the warmth lingers. When he finishes, he exhales. Not a sigh, but something like release. They exchange no thanks. It isn't needed. Between them exists a different kind of language, one made of work, of fatigue, of the small mercies that pass unnoticed between men who build and burn for a living. The blacksmith stands, puts on his coat again. He leaves the empty plate on the table, places his hand briefly on the baker's shoulder. The touch is rough, awkward, but sincere, the rare kind of gesture that holds the weight of friendship without the burden of intimacy. Then he steps out into the fog. The door closes softly. The warmth of his presence fades almost immediately, swallowed by the quiet. But something remains, a small echo of shared existence, faint as the glow of the dying fire. The baker stands still for a long while, looking at the two pieces of coal left on the table. He picks them up, weighs them in his palm. They are heavy, perfect, cold. He adds them to the pile near the oven, their dark shine catching the last of the lamplight. He will burn them tomorrow, perhaps the next day. They will become a part of his warmth, part of his breath. He sits again, facing the oven. The fire inside flickers weakly, the light trembling across his face. He feels the weight of the city pressing down, not cruelly, but inevitably. He thinks of the coal cellar, of the master, of the woman, of everyone whose warmth has faded, but whose absence still fills the air. He closes his eyes for a moment, listening to the silence between heartbeats. Outside, the fog thickens. Inside, the last spark in the oven exhales a single, final sigh. The air begins to change before the light does. It cools first, barely, like a held breath, and the scent in the bakery shifts. The warmth that once carried the smell of bread now smells faintly of stone and ember. It is the scent of endings, quiet, honest, unafraid. He recognizes it immediately. It is the smell of every evening he has ever lived. The fire inside the oven burns low, its glow muted to a deep, pulsing red. He opens the iron door just a crack and watches the coals breathe in the draught. The faint hiss reminds him of wind passing through tall grass, a sound both alive and fading. He adds nothing more to the fire. It no longer needs feeding. Some things are meant to finish by themselves. The room is filled with the slow amber of sunset. Through the narrow gap in the shutters, light spills across the counter, turning the wooden boards into rivers of gold. Every speck of flour catches it, suspended mid-air like dust caught in honey. The glow travels across the wall, touching the jars, the tools, the old broom leaning by the door. For a brief moment, even the cracks in the ceiling seem to shine. The bakery, for all its wear, becomes something holy. He sits near the window, his hands resting in his lap. Outside, the city softens. Its sounds blur, its edges dissolve. The shouts of the market fade into murmurs. The clatter of carts grows rhythmic and distant. Everything slows. Even the pigeons that had spent the day fighting over crumbs now perch on the rooftops in still rows, like notes on a silent staff. The baker watches the sky change colour, from gold to copper, from copper to rose, from rose to grey. Each shift so gradual, it feels less like movement and more like breathing. He has always loved this hour. It asks for nothing. It only invites to watch, to listen, to remember. He notices the first star appear above the rooftops, faint, trembling, almost shy. It reminds him of the lamp he lit each morning before dawn, back when his hands were steadier and his eyes sharper. He wonders, not sadly, if there will come a day when someone else will rise before the sun, light their own fire, and smell the same scent he does now. If so, he hopes they will learn what he learned, that heat is not just what keeps bread alive, but what keeps men human. The street below grows quieter. Shadows lengthen, merging with the fog that begins to curl between the stones. Somewhere, a bell tolls the hour, slow, deep, deliberate. It echoes against the walls, rolling through the narrow alleys before dissolving into the dusk. Each tone feels heavier than the one before, like footsteps leading somewhere unseen. He closes his eyes. The light presses softly against his eyelids, turning the darkness behind them red and warm. In that warmth, he feels something like gratitude. Not for what he's had, nor for what he's lost. Simply for the act of having lived through another day. For having seen the fire burn and fade, the bread rise and cool, the city wake and rest. There is a peace in the small certainties of life, in knowing that the same hands that shape the morning are the ones that will close it. He opens his eyes again. The light is lower now, golden no longer, but pale and grey. The world outside has lost its edges. A soft drizzle begins to fall, quiet, almost invisible. The drops tap faintly against the window, leaving streaks that catch the last of the sun. He watches them slide down the glass, slow and uncertain, as if reluctant to leave. The sound of rain mixes with the heartbeat of the fire. Together, they form a rhythm he has always known. The music of evening, the hymn of repetition. He hums under his breath, barely audible, his voice blending into the sounds around him. It's not a melody anyone would recognize, but the fire seems to respond, flickering in time, alive for just a moment longer. He looks toward the corner where the loaves sit cooling on the shelf. Their surfaces have dulled, but they still hold shape. He finds comfort in that. There's something beautiful about how bread ages, how it grows firm, loses its shine, becomes something simpler, humbler. He hopes to do the same. The drizzle outside turns to steady rain. The world darkens completely now, and the glow from the oven becomes the only light left. It flickers against his face, tracing lines across his skin like quiet handwriting. Each mark speaks of time, of years bent over fire, of mornings stretched into nights, of countless gestures repeated until they became prayer. He thinks of the boy he once was, watching his master tend the fire, dreaming of his own bakery someday. He thinks of the woman with the small hands and the soft laugh, holding bread like it was something sacred. He thinks of the blacksmith who came tonight, his eyes full of coal and fatigue. They all exist here, inside the light that still glows against his walls. Even if the city forgets, the warmth remembers. The sound of the rain grows softer again, like a curtain closing. The fire answers with a sigh. He knows what comes next. Not sleep yet, not silence, but the long, slow dimming of things. The kind of quiet that feels like the world taking its breath before night. He stands, moves toward the oven one last time. He opens the door slightly. The red fades to orange, the orange to faint grey. The coals pulse weakly, stubborn in their dying. He smiles. They remind him of himself, unwilling to cool completely, holding to the last ember with quiet dignity. He closes the door, leaving the fire to rest. Then he returns to his chair by the window. Outside, the world has vanished into fog and reflection. He can no longer see the street, only the faint shimmer of rain against glass. It feels right to end the day without edges, without boundaries, without noise. Everything now exists only as light and warmth, memory and air. He folds his hands together, his fingers still dusted with flour. He feels the roughness of his skin, the pulse beneath it. Slow, steady, alive. He watches the last trace of daylight fade from the window. And in that moment, between brightness and dark, he feels something small and perfect, a stillness so complete it could be mistaken for peace. The world outside disappears. The windows have turned to mirrors now, reflecting only the faint glow of the oven behind him. The rain has slowed to a whisper, not falling, but floating, a thin mist resting on rooftops and stones. The street is empty. No carts, no footsteps, no voices. Only the soft hum of a city half asleep, dreaming of itself. Inside the bakery, the air is dense with warmth. Not heat, not fire. Warmth, the kind that clings gently to wood and cloth, to skin and memory. It feels alive yet fragile, as if it knows it will not last much longer. He breathes it in deeply, the scent of smoke, flour and time. Each breath feels earned. He sits by the oven, his chair angled slightly toward the door. It has always been his favorite place, halfway between work and rest, between flame and air. The oven door is closed, but faint light leaks through its seams, pulsing like a heartbeat under skin. He watches it flicker, slow and steady. The rhythm comforts him. It sounds like continuity. The rain deepens for a moment, drumming softly against the roof. He tilts his head, listening. The sound feels distant, yet near enough to fill the silence. Water, stone, air, all speaking in their quiet language. He understands them. He always has. They are the same elements he works with every day. The earth in the flower, the water that binds it, the fire that gives it life, the air that carries its scent into the world. He closes his eyes. Darkness behind them is not emptiness, but texture. Layers of red and gold fading into deep brown. He can still see the shape of the coals when he breathes. Each inhalation stirs a faint echo of fire in his chest. It feels like memory made visible. He thinks of the people he has fed, not their faces. He never kept them. Only gestures, moments. A hand trembling as it reached for warmth. A child pressing a loaf to his chest. A widow holding bread like prayer. He remembers the sound of coins on wood, the way fingers brushed flour from the counter, the way silence filled the space after every exchange. Those were the truest conversations of his life, brief, wordless, and real. He wonders where they all are now, asleep most likely, some near, some far, some still breathing, others perhaps not. But in houses across the city, his bread rests on tables, half-eaten, wrapped in cloth, forgotten on shelves. He likes the thought of that. His work scattered like quiet embers through the night, warming strangers who will never know his name. The fire shifts behind the oven door. He hears it sigh, a long, tired exhale. He opens the door slightly, watching the coals fade from red to grey. The glow trembles, folds in on itself, vanishes. Smoke curls upward, pale and thin, then disappears into the ceiling's shadow. It is done. The fire has finished its day. He leaves the door open. Let the heat wander freely one last time. It seeps into the floorboards, climbs the walls, hovers in the air like a final breath. He feels it touch his skin. Gentle, human. He places his hand near the opening, not to warm himself, but to say goodbye. There is nothing solemn in it, only gratitude. The lamp above the counter burns weakly now. Its light flickers with each draught of wind that sneaks through the cracks. He watches it tremble, bend, recover, tremble again. The dance feels familiar. He has spent his life flickering like this. Bright, dim, steady, fading, bright again. Never extinguished, only changing shape. He rises slowly, his movements deliberate, careful not to disturb the fragile order of the room. He walks to the front door and opens it just enough to let the night breathe in. The air outside is cold and smells of wet stone and smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls once. Just once, as if to mark not time, but existence. The sound rolls through the fog and dissolves. He looks out. The alley is empty, but the faint yellow glow of a street lamp touches the edge of the window pane. Rain beads on the glass like tiny stars. The city looks softer now, washed clean, forgiven. He stands there for a long moment, his hand resting on the doorframe. He feels the cool wood under his fingers, smooth from years of opening and closing. It feels alive, pulsing faintly with the memory of all the mornings and nights it has held back or let in. He closes the door, gently this time. The latch falls into place with a sound that feels final. He turns back to the room. It glows faintly, a world built from ashes and patience. Every tool, every crumb, every crack in the floor belongs to him, or perhaps he belongs to them. It's hard to tell anymore where one ends and the other begins. He sits once more, this time facing the oven directly. The coals are nearly dark now, but their warmth still lingers in the air, faint as a heartbeat beneath blankets. He closes his eyes again, leaning slightly forward. The wooden chair creaks beneath him, the sound blending with the rain. His breath slows. The rhythm of the city, the rhythm of his body, the rhythm of the cooling oven, all merge into one long, slow cadence. He thinks, not with words, but with feeling, that life was not fire or bread or labor, but warmth itself, the fragile space between heat and cold, presence and absence, light and shadow. He has lived his whole life in that space, holding it, feeding it, becoming part of it. The last ember in the oven flickers once, then fades completely. Darkness settles gently over everything. No resistance, no sound, just the steady breath of the man and the faint echo of rain whispering on the roof. He does not move again. He does not need to. The world outside continues. Water flowing in gutters, fog curling through streets, lanterns swaying in the wind. Life hums on. And in one small room, filled with the scent of cooled bread and old fire, warmth remains, invisible, but still there. Sleep takes him gently, not as escape, but as continuation. The rhythm of his breath slows, folds into the rhythm of the city beyond the walls. The fire is gone, the air is cool, and yet within him something still glows. The faint echo of warmth refusing to leave completely. He drifts into it, weightless, unresisting. In his dream, he is walking. The street stretches endlessly ahead of him, built not of stone or dirt, but of bread, soft, warm, and golden. Loaves form the pavement. Rolls and crusts rise into hills that shimmer with faint light. The air smells of sweetness and ash, of ovens and morning. Each step leaves a print that slowly fills again, as though the street itself heals behind him. It feels alive, breathing, pulsing, humming with quiet energy. It is not strange to him. It feels natural, inevitable, a world born from his hands. People begin to appear along the edges of the road. They walk slowly, dreamlike, wrapped in the same soft glow as the bread itself. Some reach down and tear small pieces from the ground. Others break off crusts from the walls. Still others carry whole loaves in their arms. They eat as they walk, their faces calm, unreadable. No one looks at him. They move past him as though he were part of the street itself, necessary, familiar, invisible. He watches them without sorrow. There is no pain in being unseen here. In this place, he understands that they do not ignore him out of cruelty, but because they do not need to see him to receive what he gives. They take warmth, and that is enough. It is the only language that matters. He walks on. The road stretches endlessly, the horizon always at the same distance, neither near nor far. The light never changes, always gold, always soft, like the moment before dawn that never quite arrives. He passes empty stalls, silent windows, forgotten signs. Every object seems to hum with quiet purpose. He touches a wall. It crumbles into crumbs that glow briefly, then vanish into air. Nothing in this world is made to last, not even this dream. The people continue walking past him, endless in number. A woman cradles a loaf like a child. A boy runs with a piece of bread clutched in both hands, laughing without sound. An old man eats slowly, eyes closed, as if tasting memory. Each one carries warmth away from him, and with each step the world grows lighter. The bread beneath his feet renews itself, but thinner now, softer, as though the act of giving slowly consumes its maker. He looks down and sees flour on his hands, the same fine dust that always covered him in waking life. He rubs his palms together, and it rises into the air, forming tiny clouds that drift upward like smoke. They shimmer in the light, then dissolve. He smiles faintly, recognizing the gesture. Even here, in dreams, work continues. The road begins to change. The bread beneath him becomes paler, softer, until it resembles sand. The scent fades, replaced by cool air and distance. The people thin out, one by one, until he walks alone. The silence that follows is deep, but kind. It feels like rest, the kind he never found while awake. He walks for what feels like hours, though time does not move here. The horizon remains the same, endless and golden. Each step feels lighter, less certain, as if gravity has begun to forget him. The air grows brighter, almost white. The ground beneath him trembles, not from instability, but from completion. He knows somehow that this is the end of the road, though there is no sign, no marker, no gate, just space, open and soft. He stops, looks down. There is nothing left of the street, only a thin line of crumbs behind him, glowing faintly in the endless light. He feels no regret, no pride, just stillness. He kneels and touches the ground one last time. It is warm. The warmth moves through his hand, up his arm into his chest. It is not heat, it is recognition. The same warmth he gave to others, now returning to him. For the first time, He feels what it's like to be fed by his own fire. It fills him gently, completely. He closes his eyes. The light around him softens, fading from gold to pale grey. The air cools. The dream begins to dissolve. The road, the people, the crumbs, all melt into air. Only the warmth remains, pulsing faintly in his chest like a small, quiet heart. When he opens his eyes again, it is morning. The same morning as always, neither kind nor cruel. The light creeps through the shutters, touches the walls, fills the room with pale gold. The fire is gone, the oven cold, the air still. But none of that matters. Morning comes regardless. It always does. He exhales, not awake, not asleep, simply continuing. The night has settled completely now. The world outside no longer moves. Even the rain has grown tired of falling. Inside the bakery, the last of the heat drifts upward, curling around the ceiling like smoke that has forgotten how to rise. The air is thick and still, filled with the memory of everything that happened today. Work, silence, light, and the small weight of existing. He sits beside the oven once more, hands folded loosely in his lap. The coals are dead, but their warmth lingers, softer now, almost human. He does not think in words, not really. His thoughts come in the shape of sensations, the hum of air, the faint ache in his fingers, the rhythm of his breath as it slows. But if those thoughts could speak, they would sound something like this. Maybe happiness is just warmth nearby. Not fire, not light, not love or glory or anything that leaves a mark. Just warmth. The simple, wordless nearness of something alive. The heat of bread cooling on a counter. The pulse of another creature breathing behind a wall. The presence of life that needs nothing from you except to exist at the same time. He sits very still. The idea feels strange at first, almost too small to matter. But the longer he listens to it, the more true it becomes. All his years have circled around warmth, creating it, feeding it, losing it, chasing it again. The world has always measured him in degrees of heat. When the fire burned bright, people came. When it faded, they left. Everything he has known has been built around that small, invisible thing that lives between cold and flame. He closes his eyes. The memory of the oven's glow still dances there, red behind his eyelids, pulsing like a slow heart. He feels the heat that once bit into his skin, the same heat that once saved him on long winter mornings. It was cruel and kind in equal measure. A teacher that demanded his hands, but gave him purpose in return. He thinks of the people who came for that warmth, not for him, never for him, but for what his fire made. They took it home in paper, in cloth, in their palms. They shared it, ate it, forgot it. And yet each of them, for a moment, carried a piece of this same heat inside them. It travelled through their bodies, through their homes, into the world. He never saw it again, but he knows it never truly vanished. He opens his eyes. The oven's light is gone now, but the room glows faintly in its memory. The air itself seems to shine, not with colour, but with presence. He can almost see the warmth suspended in the dust, fading slowly, but not fully gone. He realizes quietly that he has never really been alone. Even now, surrounded by silence, the heat remains, a quiet companion, loyal and invisible. He leans back, exhales. The sound is soft, almost lost to the air. If someone were to listen closely, they might think it was the sigh of the building itself. Everything around him feels connected. The wood, the stone, the air, his own heartbeat. It is all one long breath shared between the living and the still. Or maybe happiness is the smell of bread that isn't yours. The thought comes unexpectedly, gentle but sharp enough to stay. He turns it over in his mind, tasting it the way he used to taste salt before adding it to dough. Yes, maybe that's true too. Maybe joy belongs most to the moments that pass through us without staying. The scent that brushes past and leaves you hungrier than before. The warmth you feel for a second, though it comes from someone else's fire. The beauty that exists only because it's fleeting. He looks toward the window, though he can't see through it anymore. The glass is fogged, silvered by night. Still, he imagines the city beyond it. All those windows glowing faintly, all those small fires burning behind them. He imagines families gathered, lovers whispering, children stirring in their sleep. He cannot see them, but he can feel their heat, faint and distant, threading through the dark like invisible stars. And in that moment, the world feels vast and kind, a network of warmth stitched together by lives like his. The silence deepens again, the kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, but holds it. He listens to it the way some people listen to music. There is rhythm in it, the tick of cooling metal, the sigh of settling wood, the breath of a man whose work is done. The sound is fragile but eternal. He realizes he could sit here forever and never tire of hearing it. His thoughts drift again, not backward this time, but outward. He wonders, though not as a question, whether anyone ever truly owns warmth, whether it's ever possible to keep it. It always moves, always changes hands. It leaves ashes behind, yes, but it always finds somewhere else to live. Maybe that is the point, to feed something that will never belong to you. He feels no sadness in this, only understanding. He has lived long enough to know that the best things in life are the ones that cannot be held. Heat, air, light, time, all of them pass through us, shaping us quietly as they go. They never stay, but they never truly disappear either. He looks at his hands. The flour has faded from them, but the marks remain. Small burns, old scars, the texture of years. He studies them like a map, tracing the lines where fire once kissed the skin. Each mark tells a story of work, of patience, of nearness to something bright. They don't hurt anymore. They simply are. He leans forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, and stares at the cold oven. It feels wrong to call it dead. It sleeps, that's all. Waiting for morning, for another spark, for another pair of hands. He imagines someone else standing here one day. Another baker, another morning, another life repeating the same gentle cycle. They will light the fire, knead the dough, breathe in the warmth. They won't know his name, but they will feel what he felt, the same comfort, the same peace. Outside, the wind rises again, brushing against the shutters. It sounds almost like breathing, deep, slow, alive. He closes his eyes and listens, his head tilted slightly, as though the world itself is whispering something soft and familiar. For a long moment, nothing moves. Then, a faint crack. The last piece of wood in the oven splits, releasing one final whisper of heat into the room. It glows for a second, then fades. But even as the light disappears, the warmth remains. It lingers, clinging to the air, refusing to vanish completely. He feels it on his skin, inside his chest, in the spaces between thought and breath. And he understands, finally, that happiness was never the fire itself, but what it left behind. The world begins again, slowly, carefully, as if afraid to wake too quickly. Dawn creeps into the alley, painting the wet stones with silver. The mist hangs low, brushing against doors and windows, curling around the corners of the sleeping city. Somewhere far away, a bell tolls the first hour of the day. Its echo reaches the bakery like a memory that has forgotten why it came. Inside, the air is cold. The warmth of last night has drifted upward, leaving behind the faint scent of ash and smoke. The oven is dark now, a hollow mouth filled with stillness. But something in the room stirs. The quiet shifts. A chair creaks, a breath escapes. He wakes. He doesn't move at first. The world feels fragile in this hour, too thin to touch, too soft to disturb. He sits with his eyes half open, listening. To the faint whisper of the street, the sigh of wind through cracks in the wood, the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. It's all there, unchanged. Morning, once again. He stands. His joints protest, the kind of pain that has become part of movement itself. He doesn't wince. It's an old conversation between his body and time, and both know their lines by heart. He crosses the room to the counter, places his hand against the cool surface. The wood feels familiar, smooth from decades of work, etched with the faint scars of knives and heat. He runs his palm along it slowly, as though greeting an old friend. He moves through the motions without thought. The same steps, the same gestures, the same unspoken order. Each movement echoes all the mornings before it. He lights the lamp. He opens the shutters just enough to let the grey light in. He checks the firebox. Empty. Then he kneels, stacking the last few pieces of wood, arranging them with the same care as if he were building something sacred. When the flame finally takes, it catches slow and steady, like an old man clearing his throat before a familiar song. The oven breathes again. The first warmth spreads through the room, brushing his hands, his face, his chest. It feels thinner now, but no less kind. He watches it fill the air, moving through the dust, weaving itself into the morning. Every day it feels like a small miracle, though he never calls it that. He begins to work. Flour, water, salt. Nothing changes, yet everything feels new. His hands move slower than they once did, but there's grace in that slowness, a quiet precision that comes only after years of repetition. The dough resists, then yields, just as it always has. The rhythm returns, and with it the sound of living, the slap of dough on wood, the low hum of fire, the faint sigh of air escaping through the chimney. For a moment he pauses, leaning against the counter. The light has shifted, soft gold now, seeping through the window in wide, gentle bands. It rests on the loaves lined up for baking, giving them the glow of something alive. He watches the way the flour catches the light, turning the air around them into a haze of gold and dust. He breathes it in. It smells of home, though he has none. There's peace in the work today, not the peace of absence, but of understanding. The kind that comes when a man stops asking why. Every motion feels complete, final, as if the world itself were holding its breath to let him finish. When the loaves are ready, he opens the oven door. The fire greets him with a low, steady glow. He places each one inside carefully, arranging them in quiet symmetry. The heat touches his skin. It doesn't sting anymore. It feels almost like affection. He steps back and waits. Time moves differently here, slower but kinder. The room fills with the scent of baking bread, the sound of small invisible cracks forming in the crust as the dough expands. It is the sound of warmth becoming form. He closes his eyes, lets it surround him completely. It feels like being inside a heartbeat. When the loaves are done, he removes them one by one, setting them on the counter in perfect rows. They steam softly, glowing in the morning light. He looks at them the way one might look at a field after rain, grateful but distant. This is the sight that has defined his life. Bread cooling, light shifting, time passing. It is all he has ever needed. And then, something different happens. For the first time in as long as he can remember, he takes one loaf and sets it aside. Not for sale, not for delivery, but for himself. He places it on a small wooden plate near the window, where the light falls directly on it. He stands there for a long moment, unsure what to do next. The idea of keeping it feels almost rebellious, like speaking too loudly in a quiet church. He sits. The loaf rests before him, still warm. Steam rises slowly, curling into the light. He watches it fade, reform, fade again. He thinks of all the mornings when he made bread for others and never thought of hunger. He wonders when he stopped tasting it for himself. He reaches out a hand, almost touches the crust, then pulls back. He doesn't want to break it. He doesn't need to. It's enough to look. The warmth radiates gently from it, filling the space between them like breath. He smiles, a small, quiet smile, the kind that comes not from joy, but from understanding. The bread belongs to no one. It exists simply because he made it, and that is enough. He leans back, eyes half closed, and listens. Outside, the city begins to stir. Footsteps echo on wet stone. Voices rise. A cartwheel squeals. Life continues. And inside this small room, the air hums with the same rhythm. Work, warmth, waiting. He looks once more at the loaf on the plate. Its crust catches the sunlight, glowing faintly. He does not eat it. He only watches, as if afraid that by taking it, he would disturb the quiet balance of the morning. The bread cools slowly. Steam fades. The warmth softens, then disappears. He sits there still, calm, content, alive in the silence that follows. Outside, a bell rings again, marking the hour. He listens to it with his eyes closed. The day has begun. The day unfolds outside his window like a slow tide. At first, there is only stillness, a faint shimmer of light on wet cobblestones, the distant echo of a bell counting the hour. Then, gradually, sound returns to the world. It begins softly, a whisper at the edge of the air, footsteps, a door closing, a wheel creaking on stone. Each noise small, insignificant alone, yet together, forming the first breath of morning. He stands by the window, one hand resting on the frame. The glass is cool beneath his fingers, but sunlight warms the back of his hand. He watches the street below, not out of curiosity, but habit. The same people walk the same paths they always have, their movements forming a rhythm older than memory. The milk boy passes first, dragging his cart through puddles that mirror the pale sky. The wheels make a sound like sighing. Behind him, a woman sweeps her doorstep, her broom brushing wet dust into the gutter. From somewhere down the street, the low rumble of a wagon grows louder. Iron rim on stone, the sound vibrating through the walls. And above it all, faint and distant, the bells begin. Their tone rolls through the air, steady and slow, like the heartbeat of the city itself. Each bell answers another, echoing across rooftops and alleys. The sound does not demand attention. It simply exists, vast and patient. It reminds him of the ocean he's never seen. Inside the bakery, the noise feels muted, softened by walls thick with years of flour and smoke. It It seeps through the cracks, through the wood and glass, wrapping around him like a blanket of living air. He listens, not to the meaning, but to the texture of it all, the sound of life, layered and endless. He moves to the counter, begins to stack the loaves, one by one. Each movement falls in time with the rhythm outside, the creak of the cart, the clang of the bells, the flutter of pigeons above. Work and world become the same motion. He doesn't need to think. His body knows the tempo of the city better than his mind ever did. A child's laughter rings out somewhere close, sharp and fleeting. It cuts through the deeper tones like sunlight through fog. He pauses, looking toward the sound, though the street below is empty now. For a moment, he feels the faint echo of something he can't quite name. Joy, maybe, or memory. Then the noise fades, carried away by the wind. The smell of bread mixes with the scent of rain-soaked stone drifting in through the window. The combination is strange but familiar. Earth and warmth, life and ash. He inhales deeply. This, he thinks, is what morning has always meant, the meeting of what is made and what simply is. The bells continue. A rhythm emerges, uneven, imperfect, beautiful in its persistence. Between their tolls, the world hums, horses snorting, water dripping, a merchant shouting his first prices of the day. Somewhere, a violin begins to play. The melody is faint, almost lost beneath the noise, but it threads through the air like smoke, thin and bright. It is not a grand song, just a wandering tune, fragile as glass. Yet it holds everything together for a moment. He stops working to listen. The music reminds him of the sound the oven made when the fire was at its gentlest. A soft hum, steady and kind. He wonders if the player knows how beautiful it is to fill silence without breaking it. The city outside grows busier. Voices overlap, footsteps multiply, the sound of life reaching its daily crescendo. Through the half-open window, air rushes in, carrying the chaos of morning. It doesn't disturb him. It feels right. The world must move, even when he does not. He wipes the counter, arranges the bread for display, and steps back. The bakery looks the same as it always has. Small, quiet, filled with the same golden light. But something about the sound outside changes it. For the first time, he feels part of it. Not as a witness, not as a maker, but as one more note in the long, unending song. He leans on the counter, eyes half closed, listening. It's strange, he thinks, how the city sounds so alive while saying nothing at all. How its voice is built from everything that isn't speaking. The clatter of wheels, the sigh of air, the rhythm of unseen hands repeating the same small labors. He realizes that silence was never absence. It was simply a space between sounds. The violin rises again, joined now by the faint tap of rain returning, soft, uneven drops hitting stone and wood. They merge naturally, the music and the weather, until he can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. It feels like breathing, like the world exhaling. And then, quietly, a thought comes to him. Not poetic, not profound, just true. He doesn't even whisper it aloud, yet it fills the room all the same. Life makes noise while you stay silent. He smiles faintly. It doesn't sound like loneliness anymore. It sounds like belonging. He steps to the window again, watching the street blur in the rain. People hurry by beneath umbrellas and hoods, their feet splashing through puddles. A horse shakes its mane. A merchant calls louder. The bells chime once more. Brighter this time, sharper, like laughter in metal form. And amid all of it, he feels something he hasn't felt in years. Peace. He turns back to the oven, checks the coals. though they need no tending yet. The air hums around him, warm, alive, heavy with sound. He stands still, letting it wash over him. The rhythm of the city, the pulse of work, the whisper of rain. Every sound weaving together, filling the space where words no longer belong. He doesn't try to understand it. He doesn't need to. It is enough to listen. Outside, the music fades, replaced once more by the ordinary murmur of life. But even as the noise softens, the warmth in the room remains. He breathes deeply, slowly, in time with the world. The bells ring once more, clear, simple, final. And for a moment, everything, the city, the rain, the silence, feels perfectly in tune. The day passes softly, as though afraid to disturb him. Light moves slowly across the walls, from gold to grey, then to that thin shade of blue that belongs only to the last hour before dusk. The city outside has already begun to quiet. Shops close, footsteps fade, voices lower. Even the air seems to settle, tired but gentle. He works still, though his hands have grown slower. The dough does not rise as easily now. The fire takes longer to catch. But he doesn't mind. He measures nothing anymore. He simply knows. The body remembers what the mind has stopped counting. By evening, he has baked fewer loaves than usual. The counter looks emptier, but he feels no lack. There is a calmness in the air, as if the world has agreed to pause with him. He moves around the bakery quietly, finishing small tasks that no one will ever notice. Wiping the table, folding the cloth, aligning the tools with care. It isn't duty that drives him now, but love. When the last bread comes from the oven, he doesn't bother to make another batch. The coals inside glow faintly, their light uneven, fluttering like a breath that skips. He watches them for a long time. Each flicker feels like a heartbeat. His own, perhaps, or the city's. He cannot tell the difference anymore. He adds a small handful of coal to the fire. Not much, just enough to keep it alive a little longer. The flames rise, uncertain but obedient, wrapping the air in their soft orange pulse. He warms his palms near the heat, the skin thin and pale against the glow. His hands tremble slightly, not from cold, from the simple exhaustion of years. He sits down by the oven, the stool creaking beneath his weight. The warmth seeps slowly through his body, soothing but heavy. He leans forward, elbows on knees, his eyes fixed on the fire. It's smaller now than it has ever been, a cluster of tiny flames breathing in the half-dark. But there is beauty in its weakness, the kind that comes when something burns only for itself. Outside, the street is fading. The sky above the rooftops has turned the color of cooled steel, and the first stars blink faintly through the smoke. He can hear distant sounds, a door shutting, a horse snorting, someone laughing softly down the alley. But they seem far away, as though happening in another life. He feels a chill creep in through the cracks, the evening air brushing his neck. He doesn't move to close the window. He lets the wind enter, lets it mingle with the scent of the bread, the warmth of the fire, the quiet of the room. It feels right that the outside and the inside should meet now, that nothing should be sealed. His gaze drifts back to the coals. They shift and crack softly, releasing thin threads of smoke that twist upward, curling like thoughts that will never be spoken. He watches them rise, dissolve, disappear. He wonders if memories vanish the same way. Not gone, just spread so thin across the air that no one notices them anymore. He takes a slow breath. The air tastes of ash and flour. It feels heavy, but kind. He speaks, though no one is there to hear it, not even the fire. Fire is memory, he whispers. It shines only while there is air. The words come out rough, almost soundless. They hang in the air for a heartbeat, then fade, absorbed by the walls that have heard every breath he's ever taken. He doesn't repeat them. There's no need. The light in the oven begins to dim. He doesn't add more coal. He just watches. Each ember fades with patience, not regret. The room darkens gradually, as though exhaling. He feels the same inside himself, a slow dimming, gentle and natural. His chest rises and falls, steady but shallow. There's no pain, only weight, like the heaviness of a blanket. He leans back slightly, the wood cool against his shoulders, and closes his eyes. Images drift through his mind, not like memories, but like warmth traveling backward through time. He sees the face of his old master, the glow of the first fire he ever tended. He feels the weight of dough in his young hands, the ache of endless mornings. He sees the woman with the kind eyes and the loaf pressed against her chest. He sees the neighbor with coal-stained fingers leaving quietly into the fog. And beneath all of it, the glow of the oven, constant, alive. He smiles faintly. The warmth is still there. It always has been. The fire makes one final sound, a soft crack like a sigh. Then silence. No smoke, no light, only the faintest red thread glowing within the ash. It looks fragile, but it will last longer than it should. So will he. He leans forward again, his hands resting near the oven's edge, palms open, not to warm himself. The air is cooling now, but as a gesture of gratitude to the fire, to the bread, to the quiet, to everything that stayed when no one else did. The world has grown very still. The walls seem to hold their breath, the air unmoving, the sound of the city distant and soft. He feels as though he has stepped outside of time. Not before, not after, just beside. A pause between what was and what continues. He opens his eyes one last time. The coals are faint now, barely visible. Their color reminds him of dawn, that moment before the light returns, when everything waits to be born again. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He simply watches. The fire breathes once more, a final flicker, and then it sleeps.